Okay, my friends, I'm back. So, okay, I left you here, right? There is this centralized, this is the paradigmatic image, right, of the Sasanians, right? Central government, connected to a religion, major bureaucracy, right? And one state religion, right? And what is that state religion? That state religion is Zoroastrianism. I just want to take like 5, 10 minutes to talk about this for you because it's a very, very important Iranian religion. Zoroastrianism is a very important, and please listen carefully. Yeah, Zoroastrianism is a very important Iranian religion, and that is sort of that sort of comes to the fore in the Iron Age, right? Yeah, around 1200 BCE, somewhere in Central Asia, or we don't know exactly when. Zoroastrianism was born in the figure of Prophet Zoroaster, right? Zoroaster is supposed to have lived around 1200 BCE, right? The Iranists claim that he was actually earlier than Moses, right? And of course earlier than Jesus, right? So what was Zoroastrianism? Zoroastrianism postulated, right, argued that there are two forces in the world, right? The forces of good, light, prosperity, justice, right? The forces of good are coming from Ahura Mazda. Yeah, the wise Lord, right? All that is bad, right, it's coming from the source of evil, which is outside, this has nothing to do with the source of good, right? The source of evil, and that is Ahriman. Right? So according to the Iranian worldview, there were forces of evil and forces of light, right, and justice, and in the world, and in order to bring back the world to its pristine position, right, which it has lost because this world is a combination of Ahuraic and Ahrimanic forces, right? So the world is created, with these two forces, and these two forces come to intermingle, and our present world is in a state of mixture, right? Ahuraic as well as Ahrimanic. So if we want to bring the world back to its pristine position, and I will talk about this pristine position, right? If we want to bring back the world to its pristine position, we have to choose, right? It's not predetermined, right? We have to choose on which side we will be, on the side of Ahura or on the side of Ahriman. Are we going to follow the path of justice and light and goodness and friendship and everything that is good in the world, right? Or are we going to follow the forces of evil in the world? So this is in very general terms, right, really general terms, the basis of Zoroastrian thought. Now, Zoroastrian thought is thought to have had influence at. I'm sorry, I just closed the door, my friends. It is the Zoroastrian religion is thought to have influenced both Judaism and Christianity, right? Judaism, how Judaism, well, in that it was during the Achaemenid period, if you remember, when the Achaemenids encouraged each population to have their own religion and culture and systematize their holy books and that whatnot, that the Jewish population came to write the Pentateuch, right? Pentateuch, the Torah, basically, right? And and there are arguments that the following beliefs that continue to this day are the beliefs that we have from Zoroastrianism. And what is that? That is the notion of good and evil, the notion of afterworld, the notion of an apocalypse, apocalypse. Okay, let me see my friend. Apocalypto. So apocalypse, my friends, right? Apocalypse, right? So, okay. Okay, so afterworld apocalypse, heaven and hell, all these beliefs, right, my friends, all these beliefs that to this day, right, we believe it, right? That there is good and there is evil, that there is an afterlife, right? That there will be a day of judgment, right? The day of judgment, very, very important also. All of this, all these beliefs that we have, the notion of heaven and hell, right, and apocalypse that appears before the day of judgment, and then the restitution of the world in whichever form, right? All of that is the influence of Iranian thought, right, on world religions, especially on Abrahamic religions, right, my friends? So, and the holy book that the Zoroaster is supposed to have brought together is the Avesta. Later on, right, the Avesta, which during the Sasanian period, a script was specifically developed in order to write the Avestan works in them. There was the Avesta, right, and then there was the commentary on the Avesta, right? There was the Torah and there was the Talmud, right? So the commentary on the Avesta was considered Zend Avesta, right? And this is a picture of a book on Zend Avesta, right? So this is the general routine of Avesta, right? So that divine grace that now before Zoroaster comes and says, hey, hello, Mazda, is the greater god, right? There were two other gods. One of the more important one of them was Mithra. This was, I personally believe, and I'm working on that, right? This was the first articulation of a divine, right, presence that could see that fought for justice, fought for light, right? And kept the population who believed in him, right, in Mithra, right, kept them from injustice and encouraged them towards justice, and his sort of symbolism was the sun, right, or the fire, right, and the light, right, also, right. It was before Zoroastrianism that this whole thing. It was through Mysteryism, which is also an Iranian religion, right, that this sun and fire and light became the source of goodness. In case you think that okay, so they were actually practicing worshipping sun and the moon. That is not the case, right? It is the stuff that is represented by the sun and the moon, right? It is the life that is given by the sun, right, and also by water, right, whose goddess is Anahit, right, and fire and light, right. So the symbolism of Mithra was the sun and the fire, and ultimately it became the sun itself, right. Ultimately it became represented by sun itself, and it was one of the first religions, right, that conceived of a God who can hear everything and who can see everything, right? So and who is fighting for justice, right, and who gives nutrition, right, to the population and protects them from the source of evil in Mithraism, which is Resh, which is, I don't need you to know that, right? But so we know that before Zoroaster came, before 1200, right, where BCE, right, where in the Iron Age Zoroaster comes and organizes a story of creation and postulates two sources for evil. And before that, there were many gods, right, amongst the Iranians, all the symbol of something, right, something that is life-giving, right, and has to do with creation, right, so that became before that, right, before Zoroaster comes and says Mazda is the highest, there were Mazda, Mithra, and ultimately Apamnapat. I don't need you to know this, but that is water, right? These were the three main gods, and even after when Zoroaster came and sort of established this so-called orthodoxy, right? Mithraism was not gone by any means, right? In fact, it penetrated into Armenia and it penetrated into Rome, right? If the Iranians were not successful in putting the Romans out of Western Asia, that's one thing that they gave to them, right, was their religion. One of the main the religions that they gave to them was Mithraism, right? Mithraism, which had its source in the amongst the Iranian population, and there is the contention that that most of the Roman Empire, right, a good portion of the Roman Empire was Mithraist, right, and Mithraism went wherever these Roman legions went, up into British Isles, right, and you see Mithraic temples all over Europe, right, especially in Europe, and in the in and okay, so, and it has been said that if Christianity had not come, right, Mithraism would have become the religion of all who became Christian, right? So that, all of this symbolism that all of these dogmas that I told you, right, originally, right, went into Christianity, right, and Mithraism was there basically when the Parthians, through the Parthians, it was given to the West, to the Romans, right, and they said that that if Christ had not been born, right, the world would have become Mithraist, right? I mean, the Christian world would have become Mithraist. Now, the effects of Iranian religions, all right, as I said, are paramount. Why consensus? Paramount, is very clear in Abrahamic religions, right? But Mithraism is specifically, right, also gave us many things, gave the Christianity many things. And I don't want to harp on it, but I just want to tell you that when you see the halo of light around Jesus Christ, or around the saints and whatnot, this is Mithra. This is the symbol of Mithra. The very cross, right? The very cross, right, is elongated version of the symbol, right? The symbol of which is not the same as the Nazi symbol. No, it's a sun. It's a broken sun, right? This is usually the way sun is depicted, also in shorthand, right? Amongst the Iranians, what was depicted, right, in ancient times, right? And this became actually the symbol of Christianity, the symbol of Christ, right? So I just wanted to tell you, unfortunately, I didn't get to talk about religions that much in this course, but I have already taken care of a large span of history, right? So going into the religions, different religions would have been not possible for me. But I specifically mentioned Zoroastrianism and talked about it a little bit because you are the least familiar with it, and like everything else, right, that has been sort of deleted by Western scholarship, right, from the East, right. This is basically yet another one of them, right, that there is this major Iranian tradition, right, that it is, of course, becomes, in this itself, becomes a world tradition because it has had such tremendous influence in terms of dogma on our religious beliefs, right? Okay, so that's that, right? So we talked about Shapur II also for you a little bit. One of the most important things that I want you to remember about the rule of Shapur II, besides the fact that, you know, all the accomplishments that we attribute to Ardashir can very well be attributed to Shapur II, right? Ardashir is supposed to have first brought the Avesta together because it was scattered, right? When the Greeks, um, that was the narrative, right? When the Greeks, when Alexander the Accursed came, right, it scattered also the Avesta, and all the knowledge that was in it was scattered around the world. So now by gathering the Avesta, we are bringing all the knowledge in the world once again under our sort of power, so to speak, right? So all that can be attributed to Shapur II, but one of the important ones of the processes that took place during Shapur II's time also is the attack of Arabs, right? This is a picture of the mints of the Sasanians, and you see that, you know, the silver based coinage of the Iranian empires, as opposed to the gold based um, and silver-based coinage of the Romans, basically became the basis of the currency, right? Remember that we said that the first time that coinage was produced was during the Achaemenid period in Western Anatolia, that to begin with, right? So the Shapur II, when the Arabs were starting. So this is my friends. Okay, this is the Persian Gulf. I'm sorry. This is the Persian Gulf, right? And my friends, this is the Persian Gulf. As you see, this is Qatar, right? Kuwait is this one. I think it doesn't show, and I don't have my glasses on, but you could just search Kuwait for it. This is United Arab Emirates, UAE, and this is Oman, right? Oman, OMAN, right? So one of the things that I want you to remember is that this is why it is called the Persian Gulf, that shipping and the Gulf itself and long distance shipping and whatnot, as I mentioned before, was in the hands of Iranians, right? So that a lot of names that we have is Persian, right? Naval from Nov, right? And so on and so forth. Because it was the Iranians that went through the Persian Gulf and came to the Arabian Sea, and then went to the Indian Ocean, and then went east and west, right? To India and to East Africa, right? And but the tribes that were living on this Arabian coast of Arabian Peninsula began sort of attacking the Persians in this area, which is called. So if this is Persis, this one is Khuzestan. This is where all the oil is. I want you to learn this actually. Khuzestan, Khuzistan, right? This is where all the oil is. It's the south of Persis, right? And of course, there is very little, right, space between the two. So they are always connected, right, from time immemorial, probably, right? And but these Arab tribes, right? There were different Arab tribes at different regions of the Arabian peninsula, right? That began on the eastern peninsula, began sort of attacking the Iranian, the Sasanian Empire, and Shapur II went against these, right, and brought all of the Persian Gulf again under the Sasanian control. This part of the Gulf under Sasanian control, right, and really sort of killed many Arabs, and he is said to have sort of even created a chain of people by the kind of stuff that they did in ancient times, and they still sometimes do for torture, right? I won't go into the details of it, but among the things that he also did is that he brought a number of these tribes, and they came to settle, right, in this Khuzestan province of Iran, right? They came to settle in the Khuzestan province of Iran, but Shapur even settled them further east into the Iranian plateau. Excuse me. So he's known actually for pacifying the Arabs of the Gulf area, right? And he had campaigns connected, right? And in his inscription again, he talks about his expeditions, right? And so on and so forth. One thing that I wanted to also tell you is that, of course, the Zoroastrian, the Iranian religious spectrum, right? Say just to concentrate on two of them, of Mazda, Ahura Mazda, and Mithra, Ahura Mithra, right? He was also the wise Lord Mithra, right? Ahura Mazda and Ahura Mithra, they all had various stories of creation, which was in Middle Persian called Bundahesht, right? Bundahesht. So these various stories of creation also are the stories of creation of the Iranian religious world, right? Shapur II also had campaigns against Armenia, and as I have told you, my friends, or as I will again reiterate, right, one of the important sort of stages for the Roman and Sasanian empires, right, was the control over Armenia, because from Armenia, you could go to the Red Sea, right, and go to Europe also. From Armenia, you could go to to the steppes, right, and from Armenia, of course, you had access to all of this, but it was strategically therefore very, very important and commercially extremely important for trade, right? So the Romans and the Sasanians always had sort of the friction that they had was over the border areas, of course, along the Euphrates, and of course Ctesiphon and Antioch, but also in Armenia. Basically, this area here was always a point of contention between the Armenians, between the Romans and the Sasanians, right? So this is the fire temple symbolism, right? That we have, and I mentioned to you where on the obverse of the coin, on the front of the coin, you have the image of the king, and at reverse, you have the fire temple, right? And there is a very important figure that again is supposed to have come and codified, right, all of this, and this figure is supposed to have appeared again during the rule of Shapur II, right? Armenia, I want you to know also, became one of the first, right, first regions to become Christian, right? But this pagan past, it is Mithraic past, right? This Iranian past, right? Like sort of infiltrated into their religious dogma, and of course into their cultural tradition, because the Arsacids ruled, the Parthians ruled over Armenia for even longer, right? Until from for basically 6 centuries, right? So they have, the Armenians had a major Iranian dimension to them, because they were neighbors of Iran, right? And there was always give and take between the Caucasus and the Iranian plateau, right? Once Armenia becomes Christian, right, it also becomes parts of it who move towards Byzantium, towards the Roman Empire, towards the Romans and Christianity, right? They become basically a fifth column amongst the Sasanians. But part of the Armenians were sort of favorable towards the Iranians, so that during these major collisions that the Romans had over Armenia with the Iranians, right? Ultimately, Armenia comes to be divided, and you will get a Roman Armenia and Iranian Armenia. The Iranians bring Armenia under their control once again, yes. And then after basically the 400s, right? You have somewhat of an independence, but in Armenia, like Iran, these Parthian dynasts, right? Parthian dynasties. In fact, the most important, Pope Gregory of Armenia, right, claims descent from Parthian dynasties and Parthian influence and Mithraic religion, as I said, and all kinds of different Iranian religions continue to percolate in Armenia, even in Christian Armenia. Yeah, old habits die hard, my friends. Yeah, so okay, I wanted to just give you a sense of Armenia, right? And you see here that the Armenia has been divided, right? And a sense of Armenian Christianity, and you see pagan remnants in Christian Armenia. This is a temple to Mithra that now in present day Armenians, who don't want to be Christians, right, go to the temple and pray there. And here is sun worship and moon worship, so to speak, right, in Christian Armenia, right, and of course amongst the Western tradition, right, because that's how we come to have Sunday. I've told you this, right, and Monday, my friends, right? Okay, so I told you the ideology. I mean, I told you the story of what we have. I mean, the story that 19th century Europeans and early 20th century Europeans wrote about Sasanian Iran was the story, i.e. the story that it was centralized, they had one religion, so religion and state were together. All of that was the bias that these 19th century Europeans were bringing to their scholarship, to which we owe a great deal, right, as I told you before many times, right, but nevertheless the bias that they brought, right, wherein they sort of brought the imagery of the Eastern Roman Empire onto the Sasanian Empire, i.e., when Constantine converts to Christianity in early 4th century, and then in later 4th century, Christianity becomes the religion of the empire, as we will see in the next lecture, right? Yes, I lost the train of my thought here, right? But yes, when Constantine became Christian in early 4th century, right? Armenia also was one of the first regions to convert, but they came to have a special kind of Christianity, to adhere to a special kind of Christianity, and there were many different sort of schisms in Christianity in later Roman Empire, right? Many different, yes, so the Christianity that they adhered to was different than the Orthodox Christianity, which was espoused by the Western and Eastern Roman Empire. So okay, so so with the Sasanians, I want to jump right now. I will jump to the 6th century, as you will see. But one of the things that I wanted to tell you about is this whole political ideology of the Iranians, right? That is contained also in the Mithraic sort of their Mithraic worldview, right? And that is the following. It is called the circle of justice, right? What is the circle of justice? The circle of justice argues that the king and the empire need to be protected, right? In order to protect them, right, we need an army. The country, the empire needs an army. Who sustains the army? Who sort of feeds the army, right? The peasantry, or the lower strata of the population. Just as it is our taxes that goes 90% to the Pentagon instead of going to ourselves, right? To taking care of ourselves, right? It goes. Okay, so you need an army. You don't need the Pentagon style of army, right? But you need an army to protect the land because you don't have the best of possible worlds in this world, right? And access over resources is always makes populations populations against each other, right? But anyway, in the circle of justice, the king needs an army to be protected, but the army itself is fed literally by the peasantry, right? So if you are unjust towards your peasantry, right, and in the ancient world as well as the current world, right? I.e., if you don't have equitable taxation, right, which to this day we don't have, right, my friends, right, the 1%, yeah, you have to treat your population with justice so that they could have a nice life for themselves, and then they would produce extra, right, to sustain and sustain the army and the monarchy, right? So this is the Sasanian political ideology. It's called the circle of justice. And if the king is not just, right? If the king is not just, not only he will lose his divine grace, which always is given by Mithra to you, and it is a remnant of when Mithra was paramount in the religious thought of Iranians, right? The king loses his divine grace, and what? It is rebellion is justified against that king, right? Rebellion is justified. So the notion of justice, the notion of being just towards your population, otherwise, right? It is just to rebel, right? As we have Black Lives Matter now, right? But in the Iranian thought, it is justified, right? That's why in the 20th century, Iranians had three revolutions, right? One was a tobacco revolution, so-called, which was, anyway, it was a revolution that was the leadership of which was the merchants, because they were sick and tired, merchants and the clergy, because they were sick and tired of being under the colonial yoke of Europeans, right? One of them appears at the end of the 19th century. The other one is in the 1920s by the coming of the Pahlavi, the Shah's regime, to power, right? Constitutional revolution, right? And then we have a revolution to sort of nationalize the oil, which again was under the control of the British, and later on later on the Americans, and to this day still is, in spite of in spite of appearances, right? So the notion of justice is central to Iranian thought, and then the Iranian Revolution, of course, right? Sometimes called the Islamic Revolution. So there is, you could, against injustice, you have the right to protest, right? Against injustice. So the Western world is by no means the first to think of justice. By no means, right? So just register that, my friends, very, very strongly, right? And that long before, right, the American Revolution, right? In fact, Jefferson is supposed to have read Cyropedia, which was a book produced by one of the Greek historians on Cyrus as a model king, right? And Jefferson is supposed to have read that, and some argue that he might have been sort of influenced by that. But at any rate, the notion of justice has a deep history in the Iranian world, right, my friends? And this divine grace that I was talking about can be seen in all of the paintings, right? Attached to the kings is these two ribbons that come to symbolize the divine grace of the kings, right? So, okay, so this was this was the paradigmatic image of the Sasanian Empire until my book came out. Yeah, my friends, I'm actually quite famous. Yeah, in among historians of Western Asia. Right. So I came along and I said this whole paradigmatic picture that we have that is foreign made, right, actually has to be rethought, right, has to be critically assessed. And so I went and I did my research, long research. The book is close to 500 pages or more than 500 pages. And it really made a big deal in the academic community, because I came and argued that it is impossible for us to believe that with the coming of Ardashir to power and the defeat of the Arsacids and the Parthians, right, that the Parthian cultural tradition also was destroyed with it. So I argued that there were these major Parthian families that were actually co-rulers with the Sasanian kings, right? There were a number of them. They are usually called to be 7. They have their names, and I don't want you to know all of this, but they existed, right? And one of the major things that they did, because they were mostly concentrated on northern parts of Iran, right, is that they controlled the trade routes, right? The silk trade route, especially, that came from Central Asia and ended in Antioch, right? The Parthians continued to control this basically from the 1st century, right, to the 10th century or so, according to my investigation, right? And I'm bringing out different aspects of this for my the followers of my scholarship, yeah. So which are great many people, yeah. It's just telling you about myself a little bit here, my friends. So anyway, so I came and argued that no, that's not the case. One of the major things that these Parthian families brought to bear on the Sasanians was the army. Their army was basically the backbone of the army of the Sasanians were basically the Parthian armies, right? And this was the case until we reached the period of Khosrow the First in the early 6th century, in 520s, right? Who comes and is known as the Just King, right? Because he continues the reforms that had been started by his father, and he, is supposed to have created a central army, is supposed to have centralized the treasury again, right? Again, he is supposed to have brought the people under his influence, and this is 500s, right? And Christianity is ruling large in the Roman Empire, especially in the Eastern Roman Empire. It was becoming some of its institutions were becoming actually oppressive, right? Because the Jews, for instance, they never had a good time among the Romans, whereas they were thriving in Mesopotamia under the rule of Iranians. So anyway, he made a lot of reforms, economic reforms, taxation reforms, we are told, and he created a standing army, and he did a lot of construction. And during this time, there are some Christian populations, especially the Eastern Christian population, the Syriac church, which did not follow the dogma of orthodoxy, right? They were persecuted, and amongst them were the learned men, right, of the Roman Empire, right? Because the Roman Empire continued to have, especially in the East, continued to this Greek tradition. We will talk about that when we talk about the Romans. And therefore all these persecuted scientists and whatnot, because that's what one of the things that they say about the Middle Ages of Europe is that it is the Dark Ages, because the church, right, had control over everything, control over learning, over everything, and therefore scientific thought was not encouraged. And we will see how scientific thinking went again to the West from Western Asia. But anyway, amongst the stuff that he did is his building activities, right? So that he constructed a building, it's called Torre Castra. It is currently close to Baghdad, of course, because, it was Khosrow's palace that was built next to Ctesiphon, right? And it is the largest sort of dome that has the I mean, it's not the largest dome, but it's a dome that has the greatest width, right? Which is very hard, very, very, very hard to maintain, right? And anyway, and this is supposed to be his palace, a reconstruction of his palace, right? And I want you to sort of see the dimensions, right, my friends? So Khosrow the first, who ruled from 520s to 579, basically, he became known as the just king who did all of these reforms, right, and destroyed the Parthian families, right, and the army created a standing army. Right? I came, and in my book I proved that all of this is wrong, right? That the Parthians continued to be very, very important in Iranian history, as I told you, up to the 3rd century, these Parthian families, right? And that Khosrow, in spite of all these reforms, right, could not bring all of these Parthian families under his control, right? And they continued to have the tremendous power that they had in their realm, right? And that they continued to provide the backbone of the army of the Sasanians, right? So it was during the Khosrow's reign, as we will see, that the conflict of the Sasanians and the Romans comes to engulf the Red Sea, right? Comes to engulf the Red Sea because, why? Because the Red Sea had also become a very, very important sea for trade, right? Because you could come from the Sinai Peninsula, right? And this is Egypt, my friends, right? North Africa, right? Italy, Greece, right? You know all of this. Black Sea, Mediterranean, yay! Okay, so the Byzantines, right, come to exert influence on the Horn of Africa, south of Egypt, south of Sudan, right? This very, very rich parts of Africa, Eastern Africa. Well, don't talk to me about Western Africa. Western Africa is the source of gold, right? And South Africa, of course, of diamonds, right? Amongst other things, right? But the Ethiopians, right, were continuing. Let me see whether I get a better map, right? The Ethiopians are basically here, right? I mean, they're here because the Red Sea continues, right? They're here. So they are, and the Byzantines, they have become Christian. The Byzantines have control over them. Eastern Africa, the Horn of Africa, they could contact directly the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, and get all the riches and the goods that are coming from the subcontinent and from China, right? So the Ethiopians are very, very important. The Ethiopians are Christians, right? And major Christians, right? And they are involved in this trade, right? And what better, right? But in the peninsula there were Arab and Jewish tribes, right? So what better to control all of Red Sea but to control Yemen, right? And you know why there is all these this tremendous war is happening in Yemen, right? Is precisely because of this, right? So you have to have, so Ethiopians, right, come, they have been at this, the Yemenis and the Ethiopians have been at it for a while now, for 2 centuries, 3 centuries, 2 centuries already, the Yemenites are predominantly Jewish, right? And the Jewish population, as I said, did not see any benefits from the Romans, but they had extremely good relationship with the Iranians, contrary to what it has become in contemporary world, right? So anyway, all these this Byzantine interferers in the Ethiopian Yemenite condition, right, it forced the Sasanians, right, during Khosrow the First, right, to come and conquer Yemen in 570. They remained there until the Arabs come and conquer Yemen in 628, right? And they established the Jewish population as the sort of ruling population in Yemen, right? And during Khosrow's reign. Well, 570 is supposed to be also the date at which the Prophet of Islam is born, right? Prophet Muhammad, about whom we were going to be talking later on. Okay, my friends? So, you have Khosrow's conquest of Yemen and continued his Khosrow became known as immortal, right? Because he had done so many things that his legacy will live on, right? Amongst the things that he did was building these huge walls, right, my friends? Huge walls, the most important of which, right, is the Gorgon Wall. And the Gorgon Wall goes from the southeastern part of the Caspian Sea, right? So, for, 40 kilometers or something, right? There are fortresses in between, right? And it's all in order to prevent the incursion of the nomads, right? It's like this, the Gorgon Wall, right? It is called the Gorgon Wall. Gorgon is this area here. It is one of the largest walls that we have thus far found, bigger than Hadrian's Wall, and I think I am not sure about the Chinese Wall. Don't quote me on this, right, my friends? So in the Caucasus, right, these are the Caucasus Mountains, right, and these mountains this is the Caspian Sea, come to the very close to Caspian Sea, right? But from that little corridor, right, the nomads could come in. So a major wall here, right, which is called the Darband Wall, and this is this wall, right? He built a wall around Mesopotamia against the Arabs, from the protection of the Arabs. And in Khuzestan, for instance, he established a canal system, right, which has been registered as one of the wonders of the world by the UNESCO. Yeah, my friends. So during his time, right, all of the learnings, right, he established, Khosrow is said to have established a house of learning, basically the first library, right, called the House of Wisdom, Gondi Shapur, right, the House of Wisdom, originally built by Shapur, right, when he was after all this learning, right? And in this Gondi Shapur, again, there was a translation movement of all the new sciences from Sanskrit, India, and again from the Greeks, right? Into what? Into Middle Persian, from Syriac, Greek, Sanskrit, of course the Iranians themselves, right? The hospital or Bimaristan, which you don't need to know, is actually its roots go to the Sasanian period, right? Because of all the sciences, they were the best in medicine and health, right? Okay, so I want to wrap up this session by Khosrow II, my friends. Khosrow II, also known the Great Khosrow, right? He comes to the throne by the aid of the Byzantines himself, actually, and that is a very involved story, right? But because the emperor who had helped him come to power against the Parthians who had rebelled against him, right? That emperor was called Maurice, right? Roman Emperor Maurice. And Maurice, there was a rebellion in the Roman Empire by Phocas, right? Wherein Maurice was killed and Phocas usurps the throne, right? So Khosrow II takes this as an excuse and attacks the Roman world, right? In 602. He begins a war that lasts for almost 30 years. It is known as the greatest war of antiquity, right? And during it, right, Khosrow was able, with the help of these same Parthian families, right, to re-establish for basically 2 decades, yeah, the boundaries of the Achaemenid Empire, right, so that they had all of eastern and southern Arabia, right, and they were in Yemen, they had all of Anatolia, they had conquered all of Syria. Khosrow II finally, right, conquered all of the Syria, conquered all of Anatolia, right, conquered Egypt, right, and created a realm that at 600, right, CE was at its very highest, right, at its apogee, right, at its apogee. But in around and they conquered Jerusalem amongst other things, and they take the Holy Cross away from Jerusalem. They take it to Iran, right? And meanwhile, Heraclius is in power. Heraclius and Khosrow II. So this war is taking place between Heraclius and Khosrow II. At 600, Khosrow has defeated Heraclius, right, is at the top of the world, right? But by 628, the Parthians, who were leading Khosrow's army, got sick and tired of fighting, right, and mutinied against Khosrow. So Khosrow II became the last Sasanian king of any significance, right, and around this date, around this time, there were the so-called Great Arab Conquests that will be in another lecture on the Sasanians, right? On the Arabs and the rise of Islam, my friends. Okay, so this covers the Iranian parts so far, right, my friends? And then I will begin to take the Roman part to this same period, right? And then we will begin with the Arabs, and then we will finish there. Okay, my friends? So for now, I bid you farewell, right? And goodbye. I hope you enjoyed this lecture as well. Okay, I love you all. Bye-bye.